Right. Hi, my name's Tom Pickering. I'm CEO of Winning Thinking. Welcome to the pub. Thank you very much for joining us, and for the regular attendees that join us every week. The purpose of this is a very genuine interest to get to grips with what's happening right now and what to do about it. We kicked this off, and this is about the 26th episode, so I'm pleased we did it because we've developed a pretty clear idea of actually what's going on and actually what's not going on as well. So where's our credibility come from? As a team, we've delivered 200 company turnarounds, and we've developed an approach which frankly is designed to get straight to the money and deliver results immediately. So we'll share unashamedly some of those points and learnings from that. Where's the common link with the current situation? It's really around the level of uncertainty and the extreme nature of the challenge, which is actually our comfort zone, how to operate this in this environment. I'm delighted to say that David Jensen is joining us today. David's someone who, oddly enough, I think has got good judgment. I think judgment is an interesting qualification. It's very difficult to understand, to predict someone's judgment. But David's somebody I've known for quite a while, an entrepreneurial chap who will share his view of the unfolding challenge, really around three things in the context of sustainability: doubling down versus reinventing, the highly paid executive, or the misnomer of that, and sustainability as a opportunity rather than a hurdle. So just to recap in a nutshell where I think we're at, I think when the shutdown kicked off, we had a sort of period of rediscovery, and I'll use the word unashamedly, intimacy between people overall, an interest in speaking to people, reconnecting, which has been quite profound. And it's important, I think, that we acknowledge that and don't lose that. There've also been some major buying shifts. There's also a focus on doing the right thing, I think, for the first time in a long time. And success really appears to be driven by profit, making profit, which sounds obvious, which is driven by relationships. And I've actually added a fourth thing onto this, which I think is a bit more concerning, which is the urgency to take action right now, but also a complete failure of taking action, and actually specifically new action. And we'll try and describe what that is. Rather than less or more of the same, we're actually talking about new action. So I think David, well, both the Davids on this call will discuss that. So I think in terms of the batting order, David Jensen's going to speak, then David McLean is going to speak around the people side. I'll speak in between, and then Mike Stewart, I'm delighted, is joining us. Mike is a member of the Icebreaker Core turnaround team, and so Mike's got a substantial amount of experience of that. And we're actually rebuilding our turnaround team at the moment, so that's really our core expertise. So anyway, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to David, and really look forward to what you've got to contribute, David. So over to you, my friend.
Great, stand by. Thanks for the invitation. Churchill said, to paraphrase him slightly, I'd hate to be so boring or uninteresting that everybody liked me or agreed with me. And I'm not expecting everyone on the call today to do that. But I think that although I'm a cup half full, in fact, I'm a cup 3/4 full kind of guy, I'm a sort of irrepressible optimist. I think we're living in an extraordinary time. And I think that we should be hoping for the best, but absolutely preparing for the worst. And in that context, I'm going to talk about sustainability in the three areas you spoke about: people, organizations, and the subject itself. So, by the way, it's inevitable I'm going to do a little bit of sort of self-plugging, because my talk is going to be peppered with anecdotes, and I don't want to come across although as arrogant, patronizing, or self-satisfied, but I'm going to talk about my successes, not my numerous failures. So that's perhaps worth saying, because you build me as a great entrepreneur. I think only one of those words is probably true. In my executive search and interim management business over the years, we've done a lot of outplacement programs. And one of the things, of course, that we always talk about in outplacement is how can you reinvent yourself for a different world. And the recurring experience we had with hundreds of candidates over the years was that everyone came through the door just looking to either replace their old slot with the same slot on their CV or the next leg up on their CV. And they never thought of themselves as doing something completely different and using their skills in a completely different way. And I think now in the C19 world, as I'll call it that, more than ever, executives need to be asking themselves not only that question when they're on the job market, but actually asking themselves when they're in an organization. And it's really imperative they ask themselves that question before their boss does. What can they be doing to reinvent themselves within the current organization to make themselves relevant and actually be part of the recovery plan? And I asked the question on LinkedIn last month about where are the troubleshooters, those internal rebels who are perennial pain in the posterior that some people want to get out of the organization, or the external interim managers coming in who can provide that fresh perspective unhindered by the politics and what's gone in the past. And actually these troubleshooters, really they're troublemakers. We need the troublemakers. We need the people who are going to make people feel uncomfortable and ask the questions that haven't been asked before. Because if you don't do that, there's going to be people who think they're going to survive and organizations that think they're going to survive, who in my opinion are not. So we need people to be asking the incredible, the impossible, the unimaginable, and without shame in doing so and without being criticized for doing so. And as you're always batting on about, Tom, this really is a time for new thinking, new actions, and you've got to translate that into a winning strategy. So I spent a lot of my time working with chief executives and permanent and interim candidates, and I just sense there's an awful lot of stagnation out there, that there are people just waiting for us to get back to what it was before. What can we do to accelerate getting back to the old way? And for many organizations, I don't think that's going to be possible. And I'll just tell you one thing. Property Week magazine today issued a notice that they reckon rents on London offices could fall by up to 40% because of the excess capacity. Schroders are going to make people work from home permanently, and they're one of several organizations in the last week who've provided that option, that there'll be very temporary attendance at offices. And in terms of interim managers in particular, I mean, this subject particularly close to my heart, having sort of been a pioneer in that market for 25 years. And I see a situation with interim managers where some of them are desperately asking for a new assignment. You only have to look at LinkedIn. I've never seen LinkedIn with so many brilliant people on there saying, help me find a job. There was one post which I absolutely loved from a senior executive who said, I'll do anything. And I didn't interpret that as a plea of desperation. I interpreted it as an open-mindedness to adapt to anything. And if we're all going to be working from home, and if we don't want to be congregating in offices, what is the role of a field salesperson in the future? Is that role going to have to change? Is it dead? If it's going to change, is the telesalesperson, once they've been polished up and perhaps put a tie on, although none of us are wearing a tie today, could they replicate the field sales role over Zoom and other format platforms? I've only been to 2 physical meetings since the beginning of March. Everything I'm now doing online, and it seems to work pretty well. It's not quite the same as shaking a hand, but it's most of the way there. And if you are working from home, what about the cheaper talent that can do the same role from Switzerland or Italy or Bangalore? If it's not necessary to congregate in an office anymore. So one quick anecdote about reinventing myself, which I've done many times, because once I was in United Glass to start with, selling glass bottles. They put me up in the world. I started selling bottle tops. Then I went off into another packaging company and decided I wasn't going to be in packaging for the rest of my life. And I've constantly reinvented myself since then, rather than just take a straight career path up through promotion. And a couple of years ago, I decided I was going to do something in the venture capital market because I saw an opportunity. And I have a lot of friends who are bankers in the city and that kind of stuff. Well, most of them laughed and thought this was hysterical because what the hell did I know about venture capital? And one individual in particular said to me, you can't possibly do that. You'll just embarrass yourself. You don't speak the right language. And they didn't mean that I was too posh or too rough, or I didn't speak Serbo-Croat. Apparently, I just couldn't speak the right investment language for people to buy into me. So talking about organizations, I think there is no clear vision yet about what the new normal is. other than revolution is probably needed in a lot of organizations. The trouble is, the easiest word in our language is no. If you say no to everything, you take no responsibility, you don't have to change, you take no risk, and you can blame somebody else. So there's also risk, of course, with the word yes, but there's a risk with no in the current climate, and I think that people need to be much more open-minded. And on our Anabol Consulting website, we give a couple of examples of outside thinking. So years ago, one of the big matchbox manufacturers was looking for ways to increase their profitability. And they kicked it round the boardroom table forever. And it took an outside consultant to say to them, look, it's very simple. You just take off the striking strip on one side of the box and you'll produce the boxes quicker and cheaper, and it makes virtually no impact on your customers. Or the famous corporate anecdote of the toothpaste manufacturer that wanted to increase sales. And the obvious answer was increase the marketing budget, until some bright spark, disruptive individual said, all we have to do is increase the aperture of the toothpaste tube by 10%, because people measure by length, not depth of toothpaste they put on their toothpaste brush. So instant result, 10% more sales for virtually zero retooling cost. And so when you look at business models that exist today, who would have imagined an Uber 10 years ago? Who would have imagined Gymshark 3 years ago? And that young guy's business was valued this week at £1 billion. And anybody would have said to him, but there's hundreds of companies in sportswear. You're not going to take on as Adidas and Nike. Well, he is taking on Adidas and Nike using new market models of social media, influencers, and so on. And Zipcar. Now, I was in Boston in 2000 in America when Zipcar was launched. I thought it was brilliant. And I immediately decided to launch it in the UK. I didn't have the connections and the capability to do that. I came back and spoke to a lot of people, and I was thrown out of a lot of offices. But Zipcar is all over the UK today. So don't imagine that things can't happen. We're in a different disruptive world. John Lewis's have decided that their stores are now going to be a few showrooms around the country to support their 60% online business. Can you imagine the old guard of John Lewis even 2 years ago saying we're going to convert our buildings into flats? But that's what the new chief executive is saying, because she's got a new plan, she's going to act, and of course we have no idea if she's going to be successful or not. What we do know is if she sits in the space that they've been in for the last 100 years, they won't be in any space at all for very much longer. So I'm a great believer in taking risks. Just don't bet the ranch, unless of course you know that you're about to lose the ranch anyway, in which case I think you can go hell for leather. There's a particular anecdote I want to tell about an American investment bank, and this sort of relates to people and organizations and thinking about the old ways and sustainable ways of doing things in the past. I was chatting to a pal of mine who's a director of an investment bank the other day, and he was explaining how they're going to downgrade their property portfolio where they spend £468 million across EMEA a year on leases, and they want to halve that. And we were discussing the challenges that come with that. And he was talking about one of their European offices. And he said, the problem we've got there is we'd quite like to sort of do something about the catering operation. But the problem we have is that it's quite heavily subsidized, and so many of our staff are low paid and depend on that as part of their package that we're not quite sure what to do with it. And I couldn't hold back my utter astonishment. And I said, what are you talking about? You're an investment bank with dozens of people earning enormous multi-million pound salaries, and you can't turn around and just trim a lot of them at the top, make the catering not subsidized, and raise the salaries of the people at the bottom. If you had any morals as an employer, that's what you'd do. And in fact, there's been a couple of examples of a company in Seattle recently where the board took a pay cut and guaranteed that no person in the company, no matter how lowly they were, would earn less than $50,000 a year. And the result has been improved staff loyalty. It's been reduced churn and training rate costs. It's resulted in people being able to start families, buy houses, and be joyous. What a great model for a business. And so when you look at these enormous salaries that are being paid, multi-million pound salaries, you know, I have no objection to Bill Gates being a multi-billionaire, probably nearly a trillionaire, because he invented something that the whole world happened to want to buy. But if you're just a salary man that's gone up through the ranks, when I started business in 1975, the chief executive was not earning a multiple of hundreds of times of his mid-staff characters. but today they are. And when you look at these people who said, oh, I'm going to trim my salary during the COVID furlough period, but then you look at the share options they've been awarded nonetheless that make the salary almost insignificant, it's kind of lacking in authenticity and credibility and, I think, morality. Is an organization so badly run that it doesn't have a proper succession plan? If it has a proper succession plan, you should be able to fire the entire board and offer all the number twos the same jobs without increasing their salaries. They'll be delighted to have the opportunity. So if you're looking for massive opportunities for cost savings in your post-COVID-19 recovery plan, apart from shedding offices that you don't need, how about shedding the board that frankly you shouldn't need if you've run your business properly with a great succession plan? If you haven't got a great succession plan, you should fire the board for not having one anyway. I mean, it's as simple as that in my view. And of course people say, oh, well, you know, if you don't pay these big salaries, people are going to all run off to America. That's absolute nonsense. America hasn't got that many vacancies. In fact, it's got a lot of unemployment. Not everyone wants to live in the Trump world, and not everyone wants to escape an English pub. So the fact of the matter is that most of the talent will stay on board if we get our top level salaries more aligned with the real world and kick some of the benefit further down the organization. Because guess who kept the country going through C-19? It was the people on minimum wage. And it was those people who kept a lot of organizations going, the lower levels, because the board, what do? They all disappeared off home to avoid the virus and worked from home. Now, sustainability as a policy is, of course, is a subject close to my heart because of our eco-focus group business. So the sustainability is a business that took the back seat because of Brexit, got sent to oblivion because of COVID, and interestingly is now centre stage as part of our national recovery plan. And I think that a lot of organisations I detect are not yet quite aligned. It's interesting that some are realizing the commitments they made before the virus hit are worth pursuing because that's actually what the customers want. And so investment, which often can be capex free and leased and therefore paid for our savings in sustainability, is still a great thing to do. But actually, I think there is an alignment between the people who have the old thinking and the organizations that have the old thinking to the organizations that we're finding impenetrable on the sustainability point. And that is that they're doubling down on the past. They're looking back to, oh, we can't be dealing with that. We've got to make the old happen. But actually, sustainability is part of the new. And it's part of the new in terms of your PR, your B2C relationships and expectations of your clients, your B2B relationships and the expectations in tender documents, and your stakeholders. And if you go to BlackRock Investments, you know, they want to see you now cutting your CO2 emissions. They're blacklisting companies and they won't work with certain companies that don't meet those criteria. So there's all sorts of things coming that clients need to wake up to, whether it's carbon levies or mandated reporting on carbon reductions. And in fact, coming back to the people, in our eco business, we've got a brilliant team of 12 senior executives, half of whom have never been a salesman before in their lives. And they're working for us for commission only, because they realize that the world is going to be a while till they perhaps get a permanent job again or an interim assignment again. And it's a great stopgap to try doing something new and reinvent themselves. They get it. Some people we've spoken to don't get it. Their loss. We've already got some amazing contracts coming through towards our way now. So whether or not you really admit the climate emergency or your stakeholders, I can tell you in the main do, and they expect you to be doing something. So that's my galloping tour across sustainability of people, organizations, and corporate strategy. And by the way, what happened about Annabelle Capital and the woman who said I didn't speak the right language? Well, we've just completed a £20 million fundraise for a business. Our fee is 4%. And so we're going to get an £800,000 invoice out the door. Not bad for somebody who knows nothing about investment banking and doesn't speak the language.
Yeah, fantastic, David. Yeah, thanks very much for that galloping tour of enthusiasm. So brilliant. If you're going to just capture for these senior execs, which are getting paid a lot less money, what their sort of top 3 skills might be in words rather than sentences, what would they What do you think those skills should be, regardless of whether or not they've got them or not?
Imagination, innovation, implementation.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And in terms of an organisation, we've been, what does good look like? We've got this sort of metaphor of the jazz band. In other words, the jazz band that doesn't have any music, it listens very intimately to its customers, it adjusts accordingly and evolves on the job. So change, oddly enough, is almost a misnomer because it's part of the now. What organisationally, what do you think good looks like?
I think that one of the beefs I have from my own personal experience through my career is that organizations talk about strategy and it's completely disconnected to the rank and file who ultimately are intrinsic to its delivery. Yeah. And I think that if you're going to develop anything that's meaningful as a strategy, you've got to involve the absolute grassroots of the business, even if they feel they're out of their depth. You want to involve them in that dialogue. So that you get really total buy-in and enthusiasm from the whole organisation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think on that, I think that's absolutely bang on. Yeah, thank you very much for your contribution. That's great, really refreshing as usual, and innovative and colourful, all in the same mouthful. Great. I just add one thing. I think some of those top-level strategies you mentioned, John Lewis, coming from the top down, I think is flawed, because I think actually one of those retail situations, the guys on the shop floor do know what sells and they do know how to turn a store around. So I think beware of those sort of top-down strategies. But your point about taking your actions, bang on the money. So thank you very much for that. So I'll contribute some stuff now, and then David, if you get your own back in terms of asking me some questions, that would be great. And so I'd like to talk about two things. One is from a turnaround perspective, the distinction between a company and a business. I mean, David just presented quite a colourful picture of tech firms. Actually, I challenged some of those businesses quite hard. I think the Gymshark thing, I haven't studied it closely, but I think it is a bit different. It is doing some worthwhile things. But I think there's a couple of observations from our current work in progress I'd like to share. So there's quite a few tech businesses that have got insolvent balance sheets, are completely unfamiliar with the threats that they face, don't have an adequate handle on cash, and but they've got a reasonable handle on the cash burn rates, and frankly paying their people too much money as well, which in an insolvency situation leaves yourself a bit vulnerable. The other thing is the expectation of these leaders is that they will somehow raise more money to put in this pot. Actually, with what's happening in October, which we've talked about before, that's very unlikely to happen. And the reason for that is because the company is broken, right? So investors simply will not put money in to pay off the HMRC and all the rest of it, particularly when the circumstances are getting more and more difficult. So the vehicle or the company is very important to consider. So that's the first thing I'd say. The other thing in terms of how do you enable some of these businesses to survive? A lot of these businesses have got very low revenue, and I think you've got to, take a pretty harsh view of mothballing some parts of a business if it's got legs for the future. It might not have legs now, and with a view to actually managing the downside. So you talked a bit about that, David, around expectations in terms of salary, flexibility of people, that sort of stuff. But it really is about generating cash. I think the bottom line is that whatever you're doing has got to cover your bills. Simple as that. The other aspect of this, a particular tech business we're working with, oddly enough, is actually got the ability to become a genuine unicorn, right? But incredibly enough, they're selling the services at a transactional level rather than return on investment, because the return on investment in this particular business is absolutely vast. So simply not selling and commoditizing digital products, which is lethal. There's a second business as well, which is similar, but actually is very profitable, but actually also needs a similar sort of kick up the arse and wake up call for a different reason. It's a business that we've been working with, which has been very profitable, bumbling along, sitting on lots of cash, but it's become very complacent and completely lost sight of its core business. Again, vastly underselling what it's currently doing. The leadership is largely misaligned with what they should be doing, and the legacy thinking has allowed the wrong behaviours to thrive. So when you're talking about the behaviours in the organisations, David, and some of the misalignments. How do you fix that? It's actually around the thinking. So unless you change the thinking, then actually nothing else happens. And actually, as a team, which includes Mike, myself, and David, and a couple of other of our close collaborative partners, we are now we're actually running the winning thinking process ourselves. And one of the specific realizations I've learned is to meet people where they are. Because it's very easy to superimpose David's view of what good looks like, or Tom's view, or whatever, but actually it's important to meet people where they are and understand really where they're coming from. That's challenging my thinking. So both of these two businesses have great business opportunities. One of the companies is screwed, but in both situations the thinking is completely misaligned with the strategy. And so the challenge is fixing the right problem. So the challenge is to fix the thinking. You fix the thinking, then everything else follows. So from a company perspective, it's really about the vehicle. It's about what's the right vehicle to get from A to B. What are the risks? And there's an incredible lack of knowledge in terms of what's actually happening in October. There's 8 major challenges happening in October. Each one of those would be absolutely phenomenally difficult to prepare for, and no one's talking about them. So this is about the emotional intelligence rather than the IQ, which is not even on people's radar. And even at simplest level, the issues around solvency, both in terms of the cash and the balance sheet, and taking on more government debt actually can reduce your solvency. Even though it improves your cash solvency, it actually screws your balance sheet. So lots of, that's the company side of it. The second side is around the business, which is actually about making the business more viable. And you need to look at the two things together, because if you're going to plan some reorganization, you need to understand what good looks like. And also understand what good looks like, you need to understand how did you get to where you've got to, and what drives you, and how aware are you of the things that you say and the implications on others, and how you're going to open up business opportunities. Where are the blind spots in organizations? What is the core business? What are you taking for granted? What are you underselling? And what are the new skills and you need in the organization? I think as well, what's the headroom for individuals? How much can those people in the organization grow and adjust? So all of this actually requires new skills. So it's all very well us talking about this misalignment, but actually there's a new skill set required here. And it's all in the language. So you hear statements like, we can't increase pricing, we'll lose customers. The tech business, we just need more funding. The question with this is, in organizations, who actually has got something to say that you're not listening to? Who have you shut down because of the color of their skin, the way they walk, the feet, the size of their feet, or the color of their shoes, whatever? Who are you not listening to? Who have you shut down? Because the skills are in the organization to flag this stuff up. And to use an analogy, it's a bit like that cartoon of, everyone's shooting bows and arrows, and the salesman's behind the tent saying, here's a machine gun, and they're saying, no, I'm too busy. I can't be bothered. I'm too busy. Actually, you've got the resources all under your nose. You're just not talking to people. You're just not listening to the reality of what's going on around you. And I think, we've got to overcome this sort of the bullshit around this as well. We create our own bullshit farms. So CEOs, this tech business, CEOs described as having the attention span of a gnat. Well, get over it, get over yourself, get over your ego. And as well, some of the dialogue we had internally, I'm great at this, that, and the other. Forget that. I'm not interested. What are we going to do new? How are we going to challenge our thinking? These are really the things. And this is our ego coming out. And so when you challenge, when people are thinking intellectually, the ego comes out, and things get shut down. So I think what does good look like here? It's around having fun. It's about resetting relationships, because a lot of this stuff is quite difficult. And you notice if people step out, you tend to get heavily criticized. The best example of that is Trump. Watch what happens. He does anything, everyone criticizes him. Lots of people, lots of snakes in the grass. It's very important to have open dialogue in a very Trump type way, to be comfortable to have that dialogue. You can see the polarization, people who like him, who don't. And also the other thing is become aware of what utter nonsense we talk. And I say this to myself, and I challenge myself, to actually meet people where they are. And so when people say things to me like, I need more money, actually, I'm thinking, you don't need more money. I can show you how to generate cash, but I need to understand where they're coming from. What do they mean by that? What's the relative merits, rather than, just bring my own baggage along as well. So I think the good news is that most organisations have got the tools. We've got to fix the right problem. It is around emotional intelligence. It's, you know, the people are bright enough by and large, and even this tech thing with the government cock up with the results of the schools. That's a classic example of where tech was applied in a situation which, in my analysis, I'm not saying right or wrong, was the wrong approach. And actually, teachers are far better to judge the likelihood outcome of pupils than any algorithm. So am I surprised that it doesn't look realistic? Absolutely. Trying to forecast using algorithm just shows the utter stupidity of a lot of the tech strategies. So I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's the level of thinking that we need to adopt and have open discussions like that. And I know that yet there's a huge polarization around people justifying not blaming the tech, which is very unhealthy. So we need to come at things pretty much with a blank sheet of paper, like that jazz band, playing no music, listening to what our customers are taking on board, listening to those people with the blue shoes and the pink hats and the green ears and the stupid spectacles like mine, and actually getting quite comfortable with uncomfortable dialogue. And insolvency practitioners are very important to restructure businesses, but that has to be done in conjunction with people like ourselves actually addressing the thinking to address the business, to open up the options, to create that jazz band that's actually got half a chance of playing a tune that someone wants to listen to. And so I guess in summary, if you're thinking, oh, I've got this covered, watch out. Yeah, that's the antithesis of exactly what we're talking about, because that's the nonsense that goes on in our own heads, which stops us from taking new action. It's as simple as that. So it's all about the words we used. It's all about picking that up. It's all about recognizing that. And it's all about really getting to a blank sheet of paper and staying there. So that'd be my contribution. David Jensen, I don't know if you've got anything.
Yeah, okay, very quick galloping sort of comeback on that. I think it's about carrot and stick. I think there's enormous talent within organizations. The Americans and the British love to bring in PwC and consultants externally. And then you look at the Germans and the Japanese, and they do the exact opposite. They tend to focus on their internal teams. But you do sometimes need the provocateur to make it happen, partly because of trust issues with internal management and so on.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes you need to take some shock action to show people that there's an urgency. And with October on the horizon, I particularly believe this. And I think that shock action has to be absolutely delivered with also motivational good news. So we're about to sink, but don't worry, we've got a great lifeboat. It's an important message to combine. So a friend of mine, Godfrey Gillings, when he took over as chief executive of FINBRA, the financial regulator, and discovered it was going to run out of money, great thing for a financial regulator, on his very first day, he cancelled Punch magazine and all the newspapers in the reception of the building. And people said, "Oh, you can't do that. People won't have anything to read." And he said, "It's a signal, all right? We're cutting everything to the bone because it's about survival." Yeah. Really clear signal on day one. I've had people I've had interim managers go in on assignments and walk through the door and say, "Right, how many redundant phone contracts have you got running?" And the in-place management go, "Oh, what are you talking about? I haven't thought about that." When Archie Norman went into the post office and said, "We're going to cancel domestic deliveries on a Saturday," the old guard would have gone, "Oh, you can't do that. My aunt is expecting her post." You've just got to be radical sometimes. And one of the things that I've often done when I've been consulting sales teams is I ask the question of the existing chief exec or the sales director, if they haven't fired him yet, have you done the calculation to see how many of your salespeople are actually profitable? When you've got a team of 40 people out there, how many of them actually make money for the organization? Yeah. And it's amazing how many sales directors never ask that question. They think that's the question the finance director should be asking, which is unfortunate because he thinks the sales director is asking it. Yeah. But actually, it's the sales director's responsibility. It's his bailiwick. Yeah. And I'm talking about the talent of the people, Tom, you're so right on, because I was in a business once and I just said to them, right, times are hard. So there is, imagine we have absolutely zero marketing budget next year. What can we invent ourselves as marketing activity that costs truly zero? Yeah. And it was really fascinating how in one morning's workshop, they came up with all sorts of crazy creative ideas, half of which were implementable and half of which were implemented, which meant the budget that did exist for the following year we could cut. Yeah. We suddenly unearthed all these things. But until then, the whole team had just said, "Oh, well, marketing will come up with the goods."
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, David. I'd just add to what you just said. I think the people who turn up, the so-called interim managers, need to be looking at their own cars in the car park as well as the bosses. Yeah, no one's safe in this situation. Everybody needs to justify it. I think the other thing is it's easy to feel sorry for ourselves because we're the leaders, or potentially the leaders, but actually it's the people on the shop floor who actually have a much more difficult time in this situation, and all they need to do is to be shown some love and given some time. That's all they need. And then the rest is free of charge, and it's just about acknowledging people. It's about using people's names. It's very simple stuff that they've never experienced before. And even when I've shut factories in, because I've had to, people have told me that it's been the best experience they've ever had, which is absolutely tragic. I'm not blowing my own trumpet. It just shows how awful some organisations are to work for. So,
well, a lot of people on the shop floor don't feel they're empowered to make suggestions of business improvement further up the scale. And indeed, if they do, there's that terrible tribe of middle managers who steal the idea and don't give credit where credit's due, or shut it off before it gets to the level of makes the decision. And
I've also noticed that actually, they've got exactly the same capability if you give them the opportunities as chief executive anyway. So why don't they all get paid? Why doesn't the cleaner get paid £1 million? It's just nonsense. It's just absolute nonsense. So that's great. And actually the heroes, as you said, it's all been turned on its head, which is fantastic. So bring it on. Thank you very much, David. So thank you for the healthy challenge of what I just said. So Mr. McLean, over to you, sir. What are your thoughts?
Thank you very much, Tom, and really interesting, David. Really enjoyed that so far today. Thank you. So as you know, I always talk about people, and I'm certainly going to do that today, but I'd like to start with a quote from science, from physics. And it's, if you remember from school or college or university, Isaac Newton's third law: every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And it's one that I've used often, and certainly when you think about it from a psychological point of view, and I kind of change it slightly, that every thought has an equal and opposite thought or feeling as well. In other words, if you keep on thinking the same thoughts, if I don't know how to change, things are fine, or the government's going to sort this out, language is very important, then nothing is going to change in your world. And this is exactly what we talk about often. David, you brought it up again today, and Tom's one of the main points we beat the drum about is that the importance of new action, the importance of making changes, because if physics tells us that whatever we give out we'll get back, then it's vitally important that we look at that from a personal point of view as well, that we need to somehow raise things up and create changes, obviously, within ourselves. So, and it all starts with thoughts. Action's exactly what we need to do, of course it is, that's what we've talked about often, but it all starts with our thoughts, because that is the foundation of everything. Thoughts create our feelings, which ultimately creates serotonin, which motivates us and gives us endorphins and etc., and then allows us to do things or not, depending on what we're feeling like. So thoughts create the feelings, it creates a chemical reactions, which allows us then to act, which will then give us the results that we want to. So thoughts are vitally important to make sure that we change them. What is it we do, or how do we change your thoughts? Language is very important. What you were talking about there, David, the new thinking, it's exactly that. It's giving people the time, giving people the space, and giving them the ability, because thinking's hard work. Nobody really does it. People confuse mental activity with thinking. It's not the same thing. For those creative people to have the allowance to have a whole morning to go and to do that, I bet they thoroughly enjoyed it as well, and they were getting paid to actually think for a change and come up with something new. So it's vitally important that we give people that ability and that chance to be able to do these things. Gather your own awareness, understand through what we talk about here, of course, and your own knowledge. I'm talking about the people on the call, your own knowledge and other things that you can gather from other places that allows you to start to go inside yourself to an extent. We don't get too philosophical about it, but to go inside yourself and actually sort of think, right, is the pride getting in the way here? Can I allow myself to actually make a change, to open up to other people? Particularly, I don't know what age most people are on here, but men over 40 years old traditionally have still got a bit of trouble opening up to people. So it's allowing yourself to open up and recognizing that we're all exactly the same, and that it might just save things for you. And then having the courage to act as well. as you were saying there, David, as well, really enjoyed it. The common word is no. It's like, I'll just leave it to somebody else. Let someone else do it. At least I won't get into trouble for it, and somebody else will sort it out. Actually having the courage to act and to make that change, and to boldly go, as you say, whether the John Lewis new CEO, whether she's going to get it right or not, we don't know, but at least she's bold enough to do something about it, because sitting still and stagnant can get them absolutely nowhere. So there we are. Thank you very much. That's mine.
Yeah, thanks, David. So just one question on that. I mean, I think the other misnomer is that change starts with us, actually, you and I, me and you and the other people on this call. So in terms of, I shared a specific learning that I had around meeting people where they are, which I recognise as being what any specifics that you'd like to share with the guys in terms of what you learned having actually done a couple of chapters of the winning thinking process?
Yeah, well, in terms of meeting people where they are, it's vitally, vitally important. It's going to be one of these sayings. We only know.
For you, David, not me. No, for you. What was some of the observations you had?
Personally, I think actually the point in terms of going inside myself, if you like, and giving myself that time to be able to give myself time to think, give myself time to understand where I might be able to make changes. Not always pushing forward, not always looking for the next thing to act on straight away. So giving myself a little bit of time, I suppose, is probably the best thing I would say. Okay,
great. Thanks, David. Are there any questions that we've had from the...
Yes, so there is, Ton has been given us a few comments, which has been great. And there is one question for you, Ton. You, David Jensen, from Ton, and it's, why would you think, it's a little bit back, so hopefully you can remember saying this, but why would you think it takes forever for chairmen to change the leadership teams? Before COVID, leadership and strategy were aligned. Post-COVID, strategy needs to change, so therefore the leadership needs to change.
Yeah, well, I think Tom's right. I think that actually it kind of intrinsically links into a malaise of short-termism and bosses' bonuses. And if the chairman and the chief exec are on incentive schemes that they've just got to improve the share price within a certain time frame to get massive bonuses, and they've built a team to deliver that, they're very cautious of disrupting something that is a benefit to their personal pocket. And interestingly enough, although we know there's many reasons to believe that Italy is a disaster waiting to happen economically, in fact, a lot of Italian companies are privately owned and are fantastically financially sound. And the reason is because grandpa is investing for his grandchildren, and they have a completely different approach to ours in terms of that short-termism. So I think that once a chairman has built his golden team to deliver his golden pay packet, he needs to be pretty certain that he's getting rid of the right people. And I think that if we had a different model of reward that wasn't just so financially enriching, you might see more flexibility, perhaps.
Yeah. I think there's a fear of killing the golden goose that used to lay the golden egg that isn't laying the golden egg, and all the relationships around that as well, which is a lot of fear, because what you effectively said earlier, David, is you don't need these people, and you simply don't.
Yeah.
I never turn a business around using the senior leadership team, ever. It's almost immobilizing the senior leadership team, ring fencing them, and then getting on and doing the job. So I think that's actually where the problem starts and finishes.
Well, I was dealing with a company the other day. They've just fired their PR director. I said, why have you done that? And they said, because all he did was talk to the PR agency.
Yeah, exactly.
So now we'll have the PR clerk talk to the PR agency. Great, good. Why didn't you do it sooner?
Yeah.
Lovely. So a question, this is generalised, but I'll pose this for you first, David, please. From Nick Brown. Life expectancy of a Fortune 500 company is around 5 years. The brand survives, the management and ownership change. Discuss.
Well, yeah, Rolls-Royce has survived as a brand. I'm not sure how much longer they will survive as a brand in a world of cataclysmic aerospace. But there's plenty of brands which don't survive. And interestingly enough, when I look at my own career, and I hasten to add, I've had nothing to do with the demise of these brands because it's happened long after my departure. Reed Corrugated Cases doesn't exist anymore. United Glass doesn't exist anymore. Caddy Products doesn't exist anymore. China Craft doesn't exist anymore. These businesses were market leaders at one time, and they've all been subsumed and disappeared off into other companies. So brands don't necessarily survive the same way as they have done forever, and certainly not doing the same things. And you see, I can't remember the name of it now, but there's some famous anecdote of a Singer sewing machine type company that ended up doing something that's nothing to do with sewing machines in corporate history. So that's a great case of complete reinvention and just using a vehicle to do something completely different. So I don't know if the life expectancy of a Fortune 500 company is truly around 5 years. That would surprise me. If that's true, then the company is not surviving and its brand is not surviving, I would say.
Yeah. There's one thing I'd add to that in terms of brand, because I think brand is only sustainable if there's relationships and there's profit. And actually, a lot of these tech businesses you mentioned, Uber and others, are dead before they even started. So they don't neither make profit nor they've got good customer relationships. So I think there's some real misnomers in that mix. I think profit is a great sanitizer in terms of establishing brand, because if someone's willing to pay for something and the business can make money, that's a pretty good test of a brand.
There is a danger though, Tom, and this links into one of your previous themes, which is that if the brand is so powerful in its communication that it ends up actually becoming a Ponzi scheme because it's not delivering profit, stand by for the tsunami that's about to hit you.
Yeah, no. Well, I think there's a sustainable tsunami that the oil industry has been dominated the PR world for the last 50 years. People have been talking about sustainability and everyone's ignored it. But I think there's the same tsunami around tech, which is dangerous. Tech has just overtaken oil investment, David, for the first time in 50 years. So there's a huge PR, and that's all around it's all around the EQ. And you must have the skills to pick this up because, as I said, there's some of these businesses that started are dead before they even started. They've got no chance of making profit. And there's no intention of making profit. And they call themselves disruptive. They're not disruptive. They're just stupid, burning. Give me the money, I'll burn it on a bonfire. I'll go and buy some chips or something, or ice creams. Just stupid. Anyway.
And we have one more question from Andrew Pepper. If I can pose this to you as well, David, please. Given COVID and the economic issues, why are the interims not overwhelmed with work at the moment, or are they?
Well, in nearly 30 years in the interim management sector, I've been told many times that interim management will be counter-cyclical, and when the executive job search market collapses, interims thrive. Actually, history proves that your external resource, interims and consultants, get chopped off first because they are the easiest resource to chop. But equally, as recovery comes, they tend to be hired first because of the flexibility and the lack of long-term commitment to massive executive salaries and payoffs and all the costs associated with that. However, to paraphrase the dear John Bunyan on Pilgrim's Progress, if a company is in the slough of despond at the bottom of the dip, like we are at the moment, the reality is companies don't want to spend money. They don't want to spend money on anything at all. And if you've just shed 25% of your staff or 30% of your staff because of COVID, you don't need so many managers anymore. So before getting rid of more of your own managers, you try to redeploy some of them to do the tasks at hand rather than bringing in the external troubleshooter, troublemaker. The trouble is that salary men and salary women are very often ill-equipped to be the revolutionaries that we're looking for.
Yeah.
So my view is that there isn't a high demand for interim at the moment because we're in the slough of despond. Will come back quicker than permanent executive search.
I'd challenge that. I think we're going back to the car park analogy. I think they neither have the skills, David, nor do they deliver results fast enough. Simple as that. Our focus is to deliver that result in one day and to empower leadership team to do that themselves. I think if you know what you're doing, you can hand the crown jewels to the leadership team, enable them to do it themselves. So I think there's a more fundamental challenge. There's a lot around psychology. People expect it to come back, but I don't see it happening. Too expensive and don't deliver results fast enough. I know the whole, like you, I've got a similar view, similar sort of background and interim, but anyway, cool. Anything else, David, or should we let's Dave, I think we probably had enough questions, maybe, unless there's anything specific.
No, just a couple of statements from Tom, but no, that's all questions done.
Great. Well, thanks very much for the contributions, Tom, and everybody else. It's fantastic. So Mike, over to you. If you could wrap up in a couple of minutes, that'd be great.
Thank you, Tom. Very, very interesting discussion, gentlemen. Really interesting. I mean, in a nutshell, the way I've distilled this is that the world has been going through rapid change, and along came COVID. And COVID has just been like a catalyst that's accelerated the change even further. And so we need to be able to drive radical change within our organizations. We need radical thinking. We need the revolutionaries to come in. But in this process, relationships, very important, very important. David Jensen mentioned key exec requirements right now. You know, imagination, very, very important. Imagining a new future, innovation and implementation. These were the 3 points that David highlighted as being critical requirements. And following on from that, David McLean says that, you know, thinking and thoughts are the prelude to action. We need to get our thinking right. And so as organizations, we need to change the way we think. And I think that all of us as interims have experienced a situation where on the factory floor, you can more quickly get buy-in to change than you can in the boardroom, because the boardroom is so invested in the status quo. So it is a difficult thing, given the structure of businesses, very often to get that change driven down from the top with existing management. So I think that at the end of the day, we conclude really that this issue of getting the thinking right and exactly how you do that with which people and how you go about effecting change and taking action, which is obviously very, very important, has made this a very, very interesting discussion for me. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That's a fantastic summary. I'd just like to challenge us all on this call. We've got a lot of action going on in the background, and if you're thinking you can do it yourself, challenge yourself, because you can't. And we have got a lot of opportunities that are coming out from the people who are contributing on this call. Some of the people have asked questions. We're reforming teams, we're reforming solutions. So reach out to me, not that because I'm sort of coordinating quite a lot of activity, and let's work together and let's take new action together, because it's only by having effective teams who actually get this right. We can't do it by ourselves, trust me on that. We're also rebuilding the Icebreaker turnaround team, which is an exceptional capability we've developed over a number of years. We've got a great way of working, so if anybody wants to join that merry band, they're very welcome. And I say that shamelessly, right? Because our genuine interest is to make a difference in this situation rather than sit around talking. So please, let's drop emails after this call. Let's take some action immediately and get on with it. We've got lots of great opportunities, so let's make it happen. But David, thank you very much for your frankness and your refreshing combination of humour, colour and passion for getting this whole thing right. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, I'm a passionate believer in your winning thinking program, so
thank you very much for your support. Really appreciate that, David. Really, thank you very much. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you, David. Thank you, gentlemen.